Welcome to the Power of Pleasure podcast. I'm your host, L'Oreal, and I'm on a mission to help you embrace pleasure as a lifestyle. This show is a love letter to all the pleasure life has to offer. And each week, I'll be chatting with friends, loved ones, peers, and people I admire about all things pleasure. Through these conversations, I'm giving you the best tools, resources, and tips to help you create a life that is ooey gooey juicy good, one shift at a time. So buckle up and let's get ready for this week's episode. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, beautiful people, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of the Power of Pleasure podcast. I am your host, L'Oreal Moss, your personal pleasure advocate and coach. And today I am joined with an amazing, amazing woman. She is a sex empowerment coach, and we are going to get into some juicy stuff today. We are going to talk about the journey from shy girl to confident sexual beast. Okay, we're gonna talk about how to help you go from being shy, being uncertain, maybe not being able to voice what you want and what you like, to being fully confident and owning it. Okay, and so without further ado, thank you for joining us, Miss Fiona. Round of applause, everyone. Yay, yay. It's so nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you. What a great opening. Thank you.
Of course, of course. So I'm sure you've done this before. So let's go ahead and get the minor details out of the way. Let's let people know who you are and what it is that you do.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm a sexual empowerment coach, and that, as I guess with a lot of people, comes from my own journey. So I was very shy, and I was shy with everything, and I kind of got over the shyness in other areas, but I was like, oh, I'm still shy with sex. And so it's been, I mean, it's just been a journey of, I mean, so many different things. And then at a certain point, I was like, oh, I'd love to share what I know, both professionally. I'm a trained energy healer and life coach and sexological body worker. So I'd love to share what I know professionally. But in a way, more importantly than that, what I know kind of deep in my bones actually works for women who find themselves with this same thing of being shy with sex.
I love that so much. And I think it's a thing, right? I know even for me, sometimes like I have no problem talking about sex and talking about pleasure and all of that. But sometimes like right before, when I know I'm about to have sex or, whatever the case may be, I'm about to do some fooling around. I'm kind of like, like reserved. And I don't know where that comes from because, and I think it, you know, throws people off. I think it still surprises my husband too. To this day, I'm kind of like, oh, and then when we get into it, he's like, okay, So I wonder, where do you think that comes from?
So I guess shyness often comes from when we're little, by how we're brought up. So, I mean, if I look at my mum, my granny, my grandma, it's like sex was not discussed. I mean, I'm British, and so sex, all the important things aren't discussed, but definitely sex more than anything else. And I think when you're brought up with that, it's, you start to mirror that behavior. And to this day, sometimes even I have a friend in England. I'm actually living in Ecuador at the moment, and we have this kind of sexy conversation online sometimes. And sometimes I'm like, and I'm like, oh my gosh, even online, I can almost turn into my mum. And I'm like thousands of miles away from this person. And I'm still finding that. And then it's, the great thing is once you know, oh, this isn't actually my reality. This is my mum's reality or my granny's reality or every other Scottish woman on the planet. It's not my reality. Once you know that, you can kind of dismiss the stuff in your head and carry on being you.
I love that. And so I know you mentioned upbringing, shaping that. And we all know how like programming and conditioning, works. But in your experience, what was that kind of, I guess, light bulb moment where you knew that you wanted to change your response to sex or just your mindset, your outlook going into the act?
Yeah, so I guess for me, I changed lots in my life when I became very ill. And honestly, when I was ill, I wasn't thinking about sex. I was thinking about how can I possibly remotely enjoy my life again. I was so ill that I was fatigued and couldn't go out of the house. And so I guess to answer your question, as I I trained to be an integrated energy healer. And as I went on that 3-year journey of becoming more and more alive, more and more well, at a certain point, it kind of tipped over into, it was almost like the aliveness included a sexual aliveness. And I was like, I'm interested in exploring that more. Because I mean, sexual energy is a life force energy. So although it felt at the beginning of my journey to less fatigue, that it wasn't about sex. Actually, it is in a way. It's like, as long as we're keeping down our sexual energy, we're not living fully. We're not, and we don't have the energy and the life force that we could have. So I guess at a certain point I realized that. I mean, I had no idea about that before I did my energy healing work. But as I became aware of that, I was like, you know what? I started to enjoy my body so much more in day-to-day life. It's like as I used the techniques of energy healing to release some of the stuff from the past, to release some of the upbringing and conditioning. And I was like, I'm enjoying my body just walking down the street. That feels good. And I was like, so if that feels good, what's it going to be like when I'm having sex? And, sort of work on that too.
That's beautiful. You really hit on something very, very important. And that is being in touch with your body and paying attention to how things feel in your body. It amazes me, like to this day, how many women are still out of touch with their body, or they're not comfortable with certain things. How many women don't really know how their bodies function when it comes to, like their menstrual cycle, hygiene, hormones, all of that. And so how do you think, I guess, just that lack of awareness and sometimes just lack of education, how do you think that influences how women view sex in general?
I think massively. And so it's interesting because sometimes people say to me when I talk about my work, it's not as sort of sexy as I thought it was going to be. And the reason for that is that if somebody comes to work with me, and this totally mirrors my journey, it isn't about immediately looking at, how can you have a bigger, longer orgasm? Or how can you orgasm more quickly? I mean, all of that's great stuff. But actually, if you're not in your body, if you're not in touch with your body, then even if you do manage to have a longer orgasm, it's not going to be as great as if you do the work to actually be embodied. And I think for me, a lot of the disembodiment did actually come from the way my dad treated me. He was so critical, and it was never physical violence, or rarely physical violence, but it was a lot of verbal put down. And I just learned that the best thing to do was to basically shut up and stay below the radar. But that kind of involved energetically leaving my body. So when I was younger, I had a beautiful body, but I wasn't in touch with her. It's like you were talking about, I couldn't feel what was going on. So it's like the first step for a lot of, there's a chronic disease of not being embodied on the planet at the moment. And so the first step for a lot of women is to actually do some work. And I say work, it's actually really fun. Being embodied is super fun. It's like, it's like knowing that you have a body, enjoying your body, even when it's nothing to do with sex. It's like being on the beach, being in the sea. It's like everything becomes greater and more enjoyable when you're actually present in your body to enjoy her.
I love that so much, and I definitely believe that. But for people who may not know what it means to be embodied, what can that look like? Or maybe even on the flip side, what are some signs that a person is not embodied?
Well, I can give you a big sign for my life was when I went from I mean, in retrospect, I wasn't living normally, but I felt like I was living a normal life. I literally went from one day to the next to having a chronic disease show up in my body. And so I had chronic fatigue syndrome. And that's really common. If you're not in your body, you're not there to hear the warning signs. It's like I say that it felt like it happened from one day to the next. The reality is that I hadn't been paying attention for 40 years.
Wow.
And so and that's what can happen, that we have these symptoms that feel, and here's the thing, if you're not embodied, it feels like the symptoms kind of descend upon you from nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
But the journey to embodiment showed me that actually I'd been ignoring my body. I didn't know how to be in touch with my body. So that ignoring led to the symptoms kind of building up. It's almost like my body tried to say, hey, Fiona, where are you? Are you listening? With a kind of a sweet, subtle thing that that if I'd been present, I could have sorted out quite easily. By the time that I got the big wake-up call, it actually took me 5 years. I mean, 3 years of that was with my energy healing course, but I spent 2 years kind of not having a clue. I had no idea what to do when I got so ill. And that's what can happen when we're not embodied.
That's really interesting. And I hear a lot of people, unfortunately, just say things like that, like, oh, I got sick out of nowhere, or, I developed this pain, or, just developing these seemingly random conditions because they're just focused on the day-to-day. They're focused on their obligations and their family and, making sure the house is clean, taking care of the kids, doing whatever with the partner, taking care of the pets, all of that, like getting so wrapped up in all of that. And I think too, a lot of women especially have just been kind of conditioned to put everything else before themselves. And I feel like that absolutely plays a role in what you mean when you say being disembodied and just going through the day-to-day, and then all of a sudden, here's this issue.
Yes, exactly.
And so for women that identify more as like shy or reserved, or the true definition of demure, since there's this demure trend happening, and people are using it incorrectly. I think it's funny, but whatever. So, but for women who really identify as that, shy, reserved, demure, even humble, I don't like that word, but a lot of people, are proud to describe themselves that way. When it comes to their sexuality, what are some challenges or some mental blocks that these women often face?
Yes. So it's interesting the way you phrase that, because one of the things that can occur when you're shy is that, and this may sound unkind, but sometimes shyness is such an introverted energy, such an introverted thing, that it can kind of almost slip into selfishness. So it's like if you are in a sexual situation, you're so obsessed with you and your shyness and is it going to be okay, that you kind of forget to see how the other person is. And so in that space, I mean, one of the things that you can start to do already to turn some of the shyness around is to be really aware of your partner, your partner's body, your partner's pleasure, because it kind of takes you away from that sort of obsession with yourself. So that's one of the kind of more surprising things about being shy. Because I guess when I was really shy, and I can still tip into shyness, in some situations, but when I was really shy all of the time, I kind of thought, oh, poor me, I'm shy. I wouldn't have liked to hear that sort of selfish word. But actually, it's really empowering because it takes you out of yourself and puts you in that space where you're it's funny because you just talked about how we forget ourselves and put everyone else first. But then on the other hand, there can be that other side to it that's like, oh, poor me, I'm shy. And it's like, okay, no, reach out and see how that is. But I think for some of the women I work with, it's like the shyness it's like they don't even know what it is. It's like it seems so full on. It's like I have a Facebook group, and women refuse to come into the Facebook group because they're like, no, I see the sex work and I can't come in. Or when they do come in, they're kind of like, I have a lot of people who are just watching what's going on, and so they sort of have no understanding of where the shyness comes from, but they just know that it's, for whatever reason, just too challenging. And I suppose that sex is, it's like, it's interesting the way things are at the moment. On the one hand, it's sensationalized, but on the other hand, it's kind of still made wrong. And there's no kind of, well, I guess this is where it's great that you're doing what you're doing and I'm doing what I'm doing, because it kind of is like a quote unquote normal conversation about sex, not the sensationalization and not the making it wrong. It's just like, hey, we have these bodies, let's explore. And I think the shy girls have so much stuff. And I'm going to say, I guess it's often like I had the conditioning from the past. It's like for me to be sitting here just talking casually about sex. It's like my poor mum would be horrified if she knew. I mean, my dad too. My dad in heaven, if hopefully he's not looking down and seeing what I'm doing, they'd be absolutely horrified. But that horrifiedness is kind of what we pick up, and we can't speak then.
I agree. I think, we definitely can internalize just beliefs or fears or stories that don't belong to us. And it's amazing how those things shape who we are, and how, we live so long, and we journey so far in our life, not even really realizing that, hey, I don't really believe this, but this person that's important to me believes this, and I want to make them happy, or I want them to be proud, or I don't want them to be horrified about the life that I'm living. And so, I take this on, whether it's a public declaration or just something that we think or feel internally. And so I really appreciate you mentioning that. And I think too, my mom, my mom has seen some of the things that I post online, and she's just, she'll reply with the mind blown emoji, or like the big eyes emoji, like, oh my God, what's going on? And I think it's more not because I'm talking about anything explicit, I'm not talking about doing, certain sexual acts or anything like that, but I think just me having the confidence and audacity to make a certain kind of joke or share certain kind of content that I think is funny, or even just saying, hey, I probably need to get some because I'm kind of cranky. I think just seeing, as a parent, seeing your child as an adult, right? And I think too, the reverse side, for those of us who've had the pleasure of being able to see our parents as adults, as people, and not just our caretakers, it can be jarring, but I think it's something that is really, really needed. I think there is a certain lack of humanity involved when we're talking about sex and sexual pleasure and just joy and pleasure overall, where everyone has these certain standards, everyone has this idea or this picture of what it's supposed to look like and feel like. And for some reason, anything outside of that becomes wrong or taboo.
Yeah.
And so on that note, I'm sure that when you're working with your clients, or even when you were taking your journey, you said this was like a 5-year journey to get to the space where you were more confident and more embodied. And I'm sure that during that time, there's probably some feelings of some guilt or some shame or some fear or just general confusion about how to move forward. And so how do you help your clients when they're navigating some of those same feelings? Because those can be really heavy. And I think sometimes there's also a grieving period that can occur. So how do you help your clients through that?
Yes. So I guess as I said, I'm an energy healer, so I have techniques that can help people to release the conditioning from the past. And so it's literally things, it's like an inner child healing, or there are different ways of going back and releasing things. But beyond that, the cognitive mind can also help. Just knowing that it's really crazy that we have these bodies, and then we have the shame, the guilt, the horror, the fear. It just doesn't make any sense at all. So having that cognitive understanding, and then using some techniques, which is kind of difficult to explain here, but it's like some energetic techniques to release the past, but also giving the ladies somatic exercises that invite them into their bodies. So it's like when you start to come into your body, it starts to make even more sense that the guilt, the shame, the fear, the everything just are crazy. It's just, they just doesn't make sense that we should be functioning from that space. And I think the combination of all those things helps people to see, oh, you know what? It's just conditioning that I shouldn't enjoy my body. It's just conditioning that I should feel shy about going on a date, or shy about being sexual with someone for the first time, or the upteenth time. It's like, we can sometimes feel shy for no apparent reason. And the more that we're actually in our bodies, and the more that we can release some of the trauma. I mean, it's a never-ending journey. It's like when you said, you took 5 years. Actually, it's continuing. It's like I see all the time. And, and I'm sure you see this too, when we put ourselves in these positions of, I'm the pleasure person, or I'm the confident, sexy girl who was shy. It's like all the stuff comes up that, for us to kind of choose more and work through. So it's a continuing journey, and exciting, because I think that we can become more embodied and have more pleasure as time goes on. And that's very, very different from the narrative that we're taught. I mean, my dad used to think that, a woman was at her best when she was like 21. So what does that mean from the time from 21 to 91? And actually, I'm so grateful. I don't see it like that at all now. I just think, that's great if you have this information and you are 21. Enjoy your body more when you have that sort of exciting young time. But if you're listening to this and you're 51, 61, 71, great. What if you could still choose to have more enjoyment with your body?
Absolutely. And I think, like you said, it's a choice. Like you choose how you want to feel. You choose how you want to, I guess, express yourself. And so I'm sure it's pretty common for you when you're working with your clients to help them develop confidence in other areas that don't have anything to do with sex. So do you find that it's like a stair stepping almost?
So what I tend to find is that most of the women I work with have done other self-development work. It's really, really unusual to, like for me, I wasn't thinking about sex at the beginning of my self-development journey. And I think it's really common that people have done other work. But what happens is, like, it's very gutsy to look at what's true for you sexually and sensually. It's very, very confronting. You have to be pretty vulnerable for all the reasons that we've said. Sex is one of the most judged things on the planet. And so to actually sort of just be there and be like, oh, okay, here I am, and I'd like to have more pleasure. I'd like to find out what's true for me sexually and sensually. If you do that, the confidence that you start to get and the change that you start to get will just radiate out into all areas of your life. And it kind of gives you there's so much talk about women's empowerment, and often that work, it excludes the sexual. It's like, I'm amazed, there's still so many things out there, self-development things and other empowerment things out there that kind of exclude the sexual and the sensual. And yet when we do work with that, it kind of, it's like we radiate outwards. There's like a charisma or a certain something that comes when we start to have that pleasure and we start to really own what's true for us with sex. So yes, it starts to radiate out into all parts of our lives.
So like sexual confidence is more about acceptance of ourselves in general, as opposed to just focusing on the one area.
Yes, I think so. And I know, I mean, maybe my views are unusual, I don't know. But I think that in order to enjoy your body with sex, you have to be in the space where, or the less judgment you have of your body, the better. It is like, as long as you're judging your body, and I can give you a personal example. I mean, I had a really beautiful hourglass body when I was younger. I mean, absolutely beautiful. And I didn't own my body. Like I said, I was also not inhabiting my body. And I was very judgmental of my body. And again, I think I picked that up from my dad. It's like, I honestly think my dad had no idea how to handle it when his little girl started becoming a beautiful young woman. He had no idea how to handle it. And so I think he kind of projected all his kind of shit basically onto me, and I was like, I don't think I even knew I kind of knew I had a great body, and I kind of didn't, but I was so judgmental. And so moving out of judgment of your body, which can occur in different ways, through releasing the trauma from the past, through doing somatic exercises that bring you into your body, through becoming embodied, all of those things get you to the point where you're not judging in the same way, and you're more interested in, oh, that feels nice, rather than, oh my God, I look fat today, or whatever. And yeah, so that it's I can't remember what your question was. I love talking about this because it's so unusual. It's like we're so primed to think about how we want our bodies to look, how our bodies should look. And, that's whatever age you are. And when we come to the space where we're more about, oh, that feels good, oh, that feels nice, it's like, that's so much more fun than, and here's the great thing, it's like when you do start to come into that space of, oh, that feels nice, oh, that's really pleasurable, it shows. It's like, and probably you've all seen these models on the catwalk who look beautiful and should be beautiful, but they're so obsessed with how they look. Are they, they're not allowing themselves to eat how they want to eat. They're depriving themselves, and that energy of deprivation, of force, kind of comes through. So you have this weird space where, yeah, they look beautiful, but somehow there's something not quite right. And I mean, I say that there are also some amazing models who have that charisma, and you can see that difference. But for us, if you're listening and you're not a model, then for us it's like, actually, let's have that charisma, let's have that. It's like when you are living a pleasurable life, when you are enjoying yourself sexually and sensually, it shows. It shows in the way, in your very being, and it shows somehow it's like it's a different layer to just when we look at somebody and we're like, oh, their body looks great. It's like, no, there's something else there. And it's so subtle, it's hard to express it, but I'm sure you all have a sense of it, of what I mean by that.
Yeah, it's the I think it's definitely the energy. A lot of people, even for people who are not necessarily spiritual, even for people who aren't, energy healers, Reiki masters, whatever the case may be, I think just because of our origin and the fact that, I personally believe we're all connected, sometimes, as unfortunate as it may be, we are all connected. We're all connected. And so I think just because of that, everyone is able to pick up on like vibes, when you get around someone, sometimes you get a feeling, oh, this person might be nice to talk to, or, oh, I think I'm going to stay away from this person, or, oh, I think, maybe this person is having a hard time. Maybe they need some help. I think everyone picks up on that in certain ways. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely like an energetic thing. And I think too, when people are living a more pleasurable life, when they're living a life that has more joy, of course, like they're gonna feel good. And like you said, it's gonna radiate. You'll be able to see it on their face. You'll be able to see it in their walk, in the way that they present themselves, in the way that they look, their aesthetic, the way that they talk, just very subtle things, whether it's maybe making more eye contact, if that's acceptable in your culture. Because I know some cultures are like, don't look at me because it's rude. But, I think it definitely varies, but I have seen it. I understand exactly what it is that you mean. And so when it comes to that, so I know you said you forgot what my question was. That's okay. I love when people get, just caught up in, what they're talking about. I love that. It doesn't bother me one bit. But the question was, about self-acceptance. That's what the question was about. And so like when it comes to self-acceptance, I guess, what are maybe a simple, like a tip or technique that you have used with your clients to help them to celebrate their uniqueness, or their whatever makes them quirky, or maybe something that you've done to help them embrace a desire they have that they maybe felt some guilt about?
Yes. So I think in terms of self-acceptance of their body, I give ladies some amazing somatic exercises. And somatic just means of the body, but I'll just, the easiest way to explain what they are, mindful masturbation. But as soon as I say masturbation, people are, ah! And in a way, it's and it's very, very, very different from how we tend to masturbate. And the technique is really, there are several different ones, but I'll just give you something that if you're listening, you can start to do. And it's literally just to be present with every part of your body with your own touch. And just to notice, I'm just holding my arm up here. For example, I can't really feel my elbow here. Let me be a bit more present here. And when I started doing this, it wasn't in the context of anything mindful masturbation, but it was when I started doing some more mindfulness work. There were large parts of my body that I just couldn't feel. So it's an invitation to be really, really present with different parts of your body, including the genitals, and to just, when you feel you're not present, to breathe into that part, to take some time with that part. But also, it's like if you practice this a lot, and it's interesting, as I'm talking, it's like I have a tendency to talk fast, but as I'm talking here, it's like maybe you can feel there's that kind of relaxation and that kind of space that comes in, and even slows me down a bit. And that's a space where you'll be more present with your body, and where if you do these kind of exercises over months, you start to break down those places where you can't feel, and you start to step into actually having pleasure in the whole of your body, not just in your genitals. And but it also, when you start to do that, it does bring you into an acceptance of your body. It's like the thing that stops us accepting our body is that we're not present with her. So it's like in the past, when I had the beautiful body, it's like I wasn't present with her at all. It's like I had I've always been slim, but I had a big journey with overeating. And it's like I was so not present. I had no idea if I was full or not full, but I was like it's like all the emotions that were coming up, I couldn't feel them. So it's like, put some more food in so I don't have to feel them. And what we're doing with these somatic exercises is inviting you back to that sweet presence with your body. And and starting to be able to really feel her and feel things like what she wants to eat, what she wants to wear, and actually who she wants to have sex with. And, you know, if you're like me, you've probably had sex with people who weren't the best choice to you.
Oh my goodness.
And so when you are more in touch with your body, you're much more likely to choose a partner or choose a one night stand, whatever that is for you, who's actually kind to you. It's like we can have this point of view, or it needs to be somebody, I need to be in a long-term relationship to find someone who's kind. No, not necessarily. You may meet someone who's kind, and you know the duration of your relationship is really short, but you're both present with each other and kind to each other for however long you choose to be together.
I think that is amazing. And I love that, you know, you encourage masturbation. I remember because I guess kind of been doing what I'm doing since I was in college. And I've always approached sex from like an educational space. Like I just wanted to learn about it because it wasn't discussed, you know, in my home. It's just like, oh, when you get your period, you can get pregnant, so don't have sex. And it's like, okay, you know, so it's like I wanted to know more about it. And so I started like reading books, reading erotica, trying to figure out, well, what even is it? Because I don't know what it is. It's being explained to me as this bad thing. And, you know, masturbation was just, it was dirty. It was something that you just don't do. For women, I definitely noticed that when it came to the discussion about it with me, it was completely different from the discussion that, you know, my parents had with my brothers, you know, whereas they were just encouraged to kind of explore and be safe. For me, it was like, just don't, you know, just don't do it. It'll be better that way. You'll be safer, whatever. And so in college, I actually was encouraging, and I don't, maybe it was just like an intuitive kind of knowing, but I was encouraging my sweet mates who were having, you know, really bad sexual episodes. I'm like, have you ever just touched yourself? And they're like, I can't do. I'm like, well, you touch yourself all the time. Well, you touch your face, you touch your hair. You know, you're touching your lips to put on your lip gloss, or like you're putting on your makeup. You're taking a shower. Like you have to touch your body when you're in the shower. So I don't necessarily mean, you know, like masturbate, like so that you can have an orgasm. But like, do you know what certain things feel like to your body? Like, do you know what you like? How can you figure that out if you don't touch yourself? Like if you don't have a relationship with your body, and then you're expecting this, you know, immature guy to, you know, come into your life and just know how to do things that feel good for you. Like it just never made sense to me. And so I really appreciate that you brought that up and you took the time to just give some examples of what it looks like. And I think too, that goes back to what you were saying earlier about how you were so disembodied, and then this, you know, you missed the warning signs of, you know, illness. You miss those signs, but when you take time to just touch your body, there are gonna be times where you're like, oh my goodness, that really hurts, right? Like it can be a gentle touch, and it's like, oh crap, like what is going on with my elbow? Or what's going on, you know, with my wrist? Or, you know, hey, there's something on my breast that doesn't feel right. Maybe I need to, you know what I'm saying? Like it can lead to a lot of discovery, and not just when it comes to pleasure, but when it comes to your health as well.
Yes.
I think that's super important. So have you ever had to help your clients through, I guess, the fear of being perceived as too much or wanting too much when it comes to expressing their sexuality or like embodying their sexual identity?
So, you know, what's really interesting, that what I've realized through working with shy girls is that sometimes, not for all shy women, but for some shy women, they shut down because they're Well, because they have a high sex drive and they're made wrong for that when they're really little. It's like that can be quite common, that shy women, and often the shy women have no memory of this because they're just like, no, not me, I'm shy, because it's like for most of their lives they've experienced themselves as shy. But as they start to work through those layers, and as they start to be more vulnerable and really see what's going on, it's quite often the case that they discover that they, you know, that they have high sex drives. And your question was, how do they start to express that? And I guess it's but well, I guess the first thing is even becoming aware that it's true for them, because for a lot of them, and same for me, it's like I've lived my life with this narrative of, oh, I'm shy. Oh, I'm shy. And then suddenly to discover through working with someone like me that, oh, no, actually, I have quite a high sex drive, and, you know, to sort of go from one to the other. And then how do I express that? And I suppose I encourage. So I suppose what happens is that as a woman goes through the process of it, well, first of all, acknowledging even that she's a sexual being. It's like for a lot of shy women, they don't even want to know it. And, you know, for some women that works fine. They kind of, you know, some women really truly don't want to explore sex, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for the women that I work with, they're shy, they maybe haven't had fulfilling sexual experiences, and they want to change that. And really having the guts to be present with that, oh, that's what I'd like. And then starting to do the work of releasing the trauma, releasing the conditioning, coming into the body, and all of that starts to develop a confidence. So, and this is what I was saying earlier, some people are like, well, you don't talk about sex with another person as much as you do about all the other stuff. But the truth is that if you do the work of admitting to yourself, oh, I'm a sexual being, and I'm going to actually do the work to change this. I'm going to become embodied. I'm going to discover what I like. And I love what you said. It's like, how can we tell someone else what we like if we don't know what we like ourselves? So we do all that work. And then what we discover is that we start to attract a different type of person. And, you know, of course, you know, when I was like, oh, have you ever had sex with people who are not the best for you? And it's like, of course, I did loads of that. And partly because I didn't value myself. And so doing all this work, you start to become more confident, you start to value yourself, and hey presto, you start to automatically invite into your life and invite into your bed the better guys and girls. It's like the people who are actually going to be kind to you. And so what you've been doing through all this stuff is actually learning kindness for yourself. That's another way of looking at the journey to becoming sexually confident. You're becoming kinder to yourself. You'll meet somebody who's likely to be kinder to themselves. And in that space, it's like, I know that some of the women I work with just feel ashamed to say, oh, do you mind if we go slow? Do you mind if, you know, I've had this experience in the past and actually I'd like to wait a bit before we have sex, or whatever that is. And that may not be the case for some people listening, but to be able to express what's true for you, and you've kind of attracted somebody who's going to be willing to listen to you, and it's also going to tell you their fears. It's like we tend to think that the other person, whether it's a man or a woman, has no fears. You know, it's like we're so all about ourselves, but we'll be in a space to listen to them and what their fears might be. And here's the thing, for most of us, it's like sex. So I guess sex doesn't have to be an intimate act. It's like we can have sex that's quick and dirty and about the genitals, and nothing, and that's not wrong. But if you want something that's like a meeting with another person where more of you is involved, where you're involved physically, spiritually, emotionally, then it does require a vulnerability. It does require being present with what's true for you. And so finding somebody else who's kind, it makes it much easier to be able to express yourself, whether it's verbally expressing yourself or energetically expressing yourself as you're having sex.
I feel like you really just made it very simple, because that expression, like, you have to not be so hard on yourself. You have to just give yourself the space to explore, give yourself the space to just say what you want and feel how you want to feel, like without the judgment. And so I feel like you wrapped it up very well. No problem.
Thank you.
And so I have another question for you. When it comes to, okay, let me back up a little bit.
Yeah.
So we discussed earlier, like, how sex is not, oftentimes discussed. Of course, this isn't everyone's experience. Some people grow up in households where everything is discussed, and it's, just open door, open book policy. But for a lot of other people, and I'll speak to my experience specifically, like I said, I was learning through books. I was reading erotica novels. I was reading, whatever educational literature I could find. I was also watching pornography to try to learn about sex because I didn't know what it was. I knew that it was something that adults did, something that they liked. Sometimes they didn't like it, but I wanted to learn more about it. And so with that came the idea that when it came to sex and talking about sex and sexuality, I needed to, it had to look a certain way. And so then a lot of my sexual identity then became about performing sex and looking a certain way to, I guess, be more sexy than it was like being authentic. And so if you could pick, I guess, one myth about sexual confidence to debunk today, what would that be?
Yeah, good question. So one of the things that I've noticed is that, and apologies if you're a man listening to this, because it's probably not you. One of the things I've noticed with having this, so my business is called Sex and the Shy Girl. There's a certain category of man who kind of thinks that I'm bringing into being women who just love sex and will be out there having sex with everybody. And it's like, the sexual confidence does not mean that. It may mean that if that's what's true for you, if you're somebody who just loves having sex with lots of people, that is not wrong. And it's not wrong at all. And but if it's an authentic expression, then it will be fun for you. And I've just had this memory of a woman when I was traveling years ago who just loved sex, and she would have sex with lots of different people, but she just truly enjoyed it. But the idea that when a woman becomes sexually confident, she becomes promiscuous and becomes, in a way, up for it in any way, in a way that a man wants, that type of man wants her to be, that is just not true. And I've discovered through it's like I've had that sort of put on me. I mean, even more so as, oh, you're the person who's putting Sex and the Shy Girl out into the world. You must be up for this. You must be up for that. And it's like, no, that isn't what it means. Actually, what it means for me is that I have a clarity about what's true for me sexually. I know what works for me. And that's what I see with my clients as well. So if you are shy, there isn't a sort of a destination that confidence will look like, because say if we have 100 shy women who heal themselves of the shyness, all of their sexual realities will look very different. It's like we, as women, we have female bodies, but we're all very different in what we like and what's true for us. And so becoming sexually confident just brings us to that space where we know what's true for us, and we're not going to be made to feel wrong or less. It's like, and I noticed when I first started to get some of these comments from men, I kind of felt wrong because I was like, oh, I should like this, I should like that, because I'm the leader of the Sexy Shy Girls. And then I just realized, oh, Fiona, no. It's like, it's almost like I'm learning all the time with working in this way with women. And that what I learned through that was like another degree of getting clear on what's true for me. and another invitation to not make myself wrong for what's true for me.
I think that's beautiful. Another invitation to not make it wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that. That made me tingle. I love that so. I love that so much. And it just speaks to, I think, the human experience in general. I think just so much of our life is, we go from, being this, authentic, just this natural version of ourselves. And then a lot of that is taught out of us, whether it's through family, friends, religious organizations, school, whatever. And then we spend all of our adult years trying to get back to, who we were when we first got here. And we have choices all the time. Even when life doesn't feel like that, we always have choices to do something different, to be kinder to ourselves, to be kind to others, to be right about things, to be wrong about things, and not judge ourselves for it. And so I love that so much. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And so another thing, I know that we've talked a lot about a lot of things, but if you could, I guess, sum up 3 things that you would like to leave our listeners with today, what would those 3 things be?
Well, actually, the first one I'm going to kind of pick up on what you've just said, because it's so key. So I suppose what I'd like to say is you're not wrong for anything to do with sex. So you're not wrong if you feel too shy. You're not wrong if you feel too confident. You're not wrong if you feel too promiscuous. You're not wrong if you feel you haven't had enough lovers or no orgasm. It's like nothing is wrong. And I think the next thing I'd like to say is wherever you are, everything is changeable. I mean, it's unimaginable that I'd be sitting here talking about sex. I mean, absolutely unimaginable. And so wherever you feel you are on your sexual journey, if you are somebody who's shy, or if you're just listening to this because it's fun to listen, wherever you are, if you want something different and if you want something more pleasurable, you could, like you said, it's like we always have a choice. So we can always have more pleasure. We can always be more present with our bodies. We can always enjoy sex more. So just know that wherever you are, you can change it. And now what's the third thing going to be? I think the third thing is just relax and enjoy. It's like whether you're in a relationship or not in a relationship, because sometimes when you listen to these types of podcasts, you're like, oh, I'm not in a relationship and I haven't been in a relationship for ages and I haven't had sex for ages. Just relax and enjoy whatever your situation is. If you want to meet someone, you're way more likely to meet someone who really works for you if you're enjoying your life. It's like that space where we over-focus on trying to meet someone is the space where we might meet the wrong person or we might compromise. So just go out and enjoy your life and see who shows up. See who shows up for you to have fun with.
Yeah, absolutely. Let it be simple. Let it be fun. I love that. Great tips. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so for you, based on your experience, the work you do, what would you consider to be your non-negotiable pleasure principle?
Gosh, I know you warned me about this question. And I was like, I've kind of gone blank. Non-negotiable pleasure principle. I guess, so I would say, because we've talked a lot about guilt and shame and all of that, which takes us away from the body and from pleasure. So what I would say is that anything that is pleasurable, that doesn't involve harm to you or harm to the person you're with, go for it. So it's like, don't allow yourself to not have pleasure just because your granny wouldn't approve. That's not relevant. It's like the only thing that's relevant in terms of pleasure is that you're not harming yourself or harming someone else. Otherwise, just go for it.
I love that. And then the final question, well, the second to final question would be, what does pleasure feel like to you?
Oh, You're asking all these hard questions. And it's so funny, isn't it, when I talk about pleasure pretty much every day. And what does it feel like? It's like, I guess when we just laugh, it's like you and I have laughed a lot during this conversation. And my sense is it's kind of like that physical embodiment of that kind of laughter and lightness and joy and fun. It's like it's that kind of stuff, but it's like it's in your body and it feels good.
Yes. I love that answer. Like I love laughing. I really feel like laughter is medicine. I think like some of the most miserable people on the planet are just not fun. Like they're just not funny. They don't laugh at anything, And so I love that, and I appreciate the honesty. And so as we come to a close, how can people, like, if there's anyone in the audience who wants to get to know more about you, maybe there are some shy girls in the audience and they're like, hey, I'm ready to work on this and become a more sexually confident and empowered woman. How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so the best way is if you're on Facebook, that's the best way. So I have, my profile is Fiona Cutts, and I have a private ladies only group that's called Sex and the Shy Girl. So that's the kind of best way to either private message me or come into the group. And then if you're not a Facebook girl, then send me an email, fiona@fionacutts.com. Those are the best ways.
Awesome. And I'll make sure we have that information down in the show notes. Well, that sums it up for today, but I have absolutely enjoyed having you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's been an absolute, to use that word, it's been an absolute pleasure to be here. So thank you so much.
Of course. All right, till next time. Thank you for joining me on this week's episode of the Power of Pleasure Podcast. Make sure to check the website, powerofpleasurepodcast.substack.com. On the site, not only will you find some blog posts and other helpful tools to help you continue the mission, you'll also be able to access the show notes as well as any social links and resources from this week's guest. While you're at it, if you found this information valuable, which I'm sure you did in some way, go ahead and take a few moments to leave a rating or review wherever you're listening to this episode and share out on social. I hope to see you next week for another episode of the show. And in the meantime, in between time, go out and do one thing today to help you embrace pleasure as a lifestyle.